right, let's do this. We'll let people make their way. You guys are prompt, punctual, on time. Let's do this. Let's run a few polls. Help me know who you are, and you can know who you are, not, who everyone else is. And then we'll jump right into our discussion of Reverb. First question is for the 43 people who are here. Is this your first Mixmaster Wyatt? Let's see. I didn't mean to do that. Is this your first Mixmaster Wyatt experience? It says poll closed. I don't know why it did that. Who cares? Just put it in the chat. Is this your first Mixmaster Wyatt experience? Okay, good. No. Second. No. Good. Keep them going. Go. Wonderful. I see a lot of familiar faces. Second question. Do you consider yourself to be a novice, a totally new, a beginner, intermediate, advanced, or guru? How would you rate yourself realistically? Okay, good. Go ahead and use the poll to vote. Go ahead. Okay. Let's see. Intermediate and advanced win. We have a couple gurus, a few beginners, and a couple novice. Welcome. Wonderful. How did you find us? Google, Facebook, YouTube, friend, word of mouth, or forums? Oh yeah, Paul is the certified guru. Certified. And Kenzeel, don't vote in the chat. Vote in the poll. You should see your poll. A Chrome notification. Look how fancy we're getting. Good. Close poll. Share results. 32% Google, 29% Facebook, some YouTube, some word of mouth, and some forums. Okay, that's totally cool. Here's a question about Reverb. What Reverb plugins do you own and use? Valhalla, I couldn't do them all. Here's some. Valhalla, Altiverb, FabFilter, UAD, or the built-in ones in your DAW. Okay, let's see here. Valhalla is the winner. Good. I love Valhalla. You have to love Valhalla. So much quality for such a good price. You have to love it. Some Altiverb, some FabFilter, some UAD, and then some built-in DAW. Good. Interesting to see Valhalla way up front like that. Very, very cool. Okay, good. How do you like to learn? You personally, you. Do you like a 2-month program with classmates and set times? Do you want a 6-month program? Do you like a 1-month course? Do you like a 1-day workshop? Just show up on a Sunday and learn one topic? Or do you like just a bunch of videos and for people to leave you alone and you can go at your own pace? You can select one or more of the following. We like to know how you like to learn. And it doesn't have to be just one way. Hugh Jones, the Ableton Reverb is not the best, Hugh. I agree with you. But Ableton, we love Ableton. It just doesn't do everything. But what does? All right, vote. Okay. Maybe it's the way I said it, but self-paced video courses win. After that is 1-day workshops because probably scheduling is not always so easy. But then people love the core courses. That's good. 35%. Excellent. All right. 2 more questions and we'll jump right in. As a producer engineer, what subject do you feel you need the most help in right now? for you? What do you think that you would want to be more confident with? Mixing and mastering, composition and orchestration, sound design, business, or all of the above? You can choose whichever ones. Okay. Mixing and mastering. Well, that's why you're here today. Good. Composition. You can always get smarter with that. Sound design. We feel confident. Business. Always helpful. And all of the above. Good, good, good. And what Tom said is true because it's very lexicon based. Last question. How many finished tracks would you like to be producing each month? 1, 2, 4, 8, more than 8. And the winner is 2 and 4 are sort of the winners, which is what, one a week or one every 2 weeks, which is I think is a good workflow. It's good. All right, good. Thank you for doing that. Let's jump right into the presentation. I want to talk about advanced reverb techniques today, and I'm sure we'll do some basics as well, but we'll jump around a little bit. And I will leave some time at the end for questions. It's sort of hard to answer them as I go, but if you have a question, make a note of it, put it in the chat, just remember it, copy and paste it. I will be answering questions toward the end. And I will try to get everyone in and out of here in an hour. I will we'll stay a little bit extra. I'll answer some questions, but I will try to run this just about an hour. If you are on a phone or a tablet, this might not work for you. You may not be able to see and hear. We're working on that. If you're on a desktop or a laptop, this will work very, very well. And if for whatever reason during the presentation, if you can't see or hear, the best fix is to log off and log right back in. Log off and log right back in. So on that note, let's start the presentation. I want to start first a little bit just talking about reverb, right? I think reverb and compression for most people are the two hardest things. I think saturation, a lot of people don't know about it, but once they see it in the school, they're like, oh my God, where's this been all my life? And in really 1 or 2 days saturating things, people get an incredible experience of like re-experiencing their music production. Reductive EQ takes a little bit of practice, but it's also a game. Compression is tough for people because there are so many controls. And, what does the attack do? When do I need the attack? When do I need the release? When do I need the knee? When do I need the ratio? And I'll do a big advanced compression free webinar soon. I never tell you when, but it will come soon because I think a lot of people always have questions about compression. But reverb is tricky for people. They don't know what to do. Part of it, I think, is because the traditional reverb controls are kind of science-y in a way that many reverb plugin manufacturers are moving away from now. And the most important thing, I think, to take away from today is that, when it comes to reverb, sometimes people, they use the send return matrix. They send to their reverb, and that's it. How their send level, they pick a preset, they send to it, and they're like, oh, I guess that's as good as it's going to get, and that's over. And what I want people to start to get comfortable to do is to edit the reverb, saturate the reverb, sidechain the reverb, widen the reverbs, do post and pre EQ to the reverbs, set the delay, set the pre-delay, use the tonal controls, and to focus reverb, right? Because reverb really can be fun. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be sciencey. It should be one of the most fun things that you do. So within the world of reverb, there's 4 reverbs, right? 4 kinds of reverb. There's organic reverb, which is like room reverb. There's analog reverb, which is plates and spring reverbs and such. There's digital algorithmic reverb, which is really sort of a digital delay box that, reverb being a product of delay. And then there's convolution reverb, which really changed the game, where you could go to real rooms and sample them, and then create a sample of that room, and that would be your reverb. And rather than a digital delay or digital algorithmic reverb, this is actually quite a real sounding reverb, these convolution reverbs. So when you're putting together your reverb plugin palette, I think it makes sense to have a little bit of both. I think you want to have digital algorithmic reverbs because they're ideal. They're not the real rooms, they're the ideal rooms. And then I think you want to have convolution reverbs because they are in fact very, very real. In pop music, sometimes digital algorithmic reverbs, they respond really well to editing, and they sound, again, sort of ideal. And pop music being that sort of shiny, ideal world, sometimes they really thrive there. In organic music, folk and jazz and rock, and sometimes music where you want to feel like you were really there in the room, convolution reverb becomes very, very important because, reverb, tells us where we are, right? Reverb helps us locate ourselves as humans. And a real sounding room makes us really feel that we're there. Digital algorithmic reverb can be very ideal sounding. And sometimes in productions, we like to mix the real and the ideal. So I think you want to have in your arsenal Valhalla or some digital algorithmic reverb that you love. And then convolution reverbs of real spaces and mixing and matching those. That's my favorite, having a little bit of both and to get good at both. So let's do this. I want to now start here. And again, if you're on a phone or a laptop, this might not work. And if you can't see or hear, we'll try to help you. If not, it's recorded and we will be able to show you how you can listen to this again if you want to reference this presentation. So let's start here. Just a little bit of ear training around some reverb, and then we'll jump into some techniques as well. And hopefully everyone can hear congas and see Altiverb. Working with reverb, I love to use percussion because it has frequency, full frequency, and it has tone, but it's not like a pad or something. You can hear it, it's more staccato, and you can hear the reverb bloom and the reverb tail. So I love testing reverbs. When I get a new reverb, I love to use a snare, which can be sort of brutally boring, but in a good way, or congas. And because I was a percussionist and a conga player, I love congas. Now, the cool thing about Altiverb is it's a convolution reverb. It's the biggest reverb used in major motion pictures. These brilliant Dutch guys went all over the world and they sampled rooms and tunnels and churches and recording studios, and they actually captured the ambiances of these rooms, subtracted out the test tones, and you're left with the sample, which is an impulse response. So this is sort of the king of convolution reverb, Altiverb. I use it all the time. A lot of people use it in the school. It's expensive, but it's worth it. And the interesting thing about it is that it has organic reverb from the rooms, but it also has analog reverb, which is plates and spring reverbs, right? It has that as well. And it samples digital algorithmic reverb. So the world of reverb lives inside of Altiverb. And it's in the school, I always have people, when we have Reverb Week. All we do is talk about reverb for an entire week in Mixing Foundations, our entry-level course. And in Next Level Mixing, we talk more about reverb editing, processing. But I'd like people to really start to think of reverb as not being one thing, but a very vast world, and start to train your ears with reverb. So as we listen to these congas and we flip spaces, you start to hear the difference between digital algorithmic reverbs, which are these ideal reverbs, these digital delay boxes in a sense, convolution reverbs, which are quirky and real, and analog reverbs, which were the first sort of human ways of trying to create reverb. And here, within these reverbs, you can start to hear that reverbs have a tone, right? They're just like drums. Rooms are like drums, and they have a tone to them. And some have a lot of low end, some don't. Some have a lot of mid-range, some don't. Some have a lot of high end, and some don't. And you want to sort of pick reverbs that flatter your dry sound. So rather than thinking of reverb as one thing, you start to think about acoustic construction. How high is the ceiling? Are there blankets? Is there furniture? Are there carpets, drapes, whatever? And to start to hear the tonality of reverbs, and of course, size. And within each impulse response, there are different samples, which is either the types of mics that they used or how far away the mics were from the sound source. So you can get a number of different perspectives within convolution reverb, different snapshots in a way, and you can choose the one you like inside of Altiverb. Now let's skip on to some different rooms. And one of the cool things to start to think about for intermediate and advanced people is the difference between early reflections and late reflections. And you'll see Valhalla Room, for example, or a lot of reverbs, as we start to edit them, they have two different sort of editing pages or parts of the menu: early reflections and the late reflections. The early reflections are the initial the response of the reverb coming back to the listener. So in a small room, the early reflections would be pretty pronounced, right? Because the signal goes into the room and then comes back. I always say reverb is like having a big ball of ping pong balls wrapped in a light plastic bag. And you throw that bag of ping pong balls in this thin plastic bag against the back wall, and it breaks open. And all of a sudden, all the ping pong balls are bouncing all around the room. They're colliding into each other. And the sound of all of those ping pong balls colliding against the walls, against each other, is the sound of reverb. It's a dense fog of reverb. So within this dense fog of reverb, there's early reflections, which is the first reflections that come back to you. And then there's this very slow buildup of late reflections. So to get good at editing your reverbs, you got to start to hear it in terms of early reflections and late reflections. And when you start to have control of these two things, you can shape the reverb exactly the way you want. Of course, big rooms and churches have a lot of late reflection. And so you can start to manipulate it, but you can't manipulate it unless you start to identify it with your mind. So listen to these big spaces and start to use your ears to identify those are the early reflections, the ones that came right up to me, and these are the late reflections, the slow buildup, sometimes usually of low frequency, that constitutes the late reflections. So there you go. Those are just some different acoustic spaces, different tonalities, different shapes, right? And you start to also hear the surfaces, whether you have wood, whether you have stone, they all sound quite a bit different. And then we can get into some large spaces, and EDM people, convolution reverbs of churches and halls are my favorite choice when I'm mixing big room music. Because they sound more real than the digital algorithmic, cousin of it. So we can listen to some really big spaces as well in Altiverb. And here's this is a small wood church. And that was Notre Dame. And you could hear those late reflections build up and sort of create a momentum that you would actually want to control in a mix. Okay, so we're moving right along. Here's some churches. And here we can go to recording studios, which tend to be very, very tight and unsexy and unexciting. So funny, you think about the most expensive recording studios all over the world, and you think, man, if I could only record in that fancy recording studio, it would just sound amazing. But ironically, once you start to hear the ambiances of most recording studios, they're very unexciting. They're kind of short and dry and moderate. They have a moderate brightness, but they're not big because they know you probably want to put more reverb on later. So we can listen to some of the world's most expensive recording studios. They're surprisingly unsexy. They're sort of tight, dry living rooms, not necessarily super big. So now let's go, we'll finish up our tour of convolution spaces just to wake up the ears a little bit about reverb and the differences. This is a whispering tower in India. I don't know where this is. Maybe some of our Indian participants know where Gol Gumbaz is. But listen to the acoustic construction of some of these beautiful houses of worship and how the architects created reverb so it would go on and have this sort of mystical experience. Okay, so there, and that shows you crazy late reflections. All right, so now let's do this. Let's go to a modern production here. And this is Ken Bauer from Sweden, one of our students. And I'll just play a piece of this. These are his dry stems, right? Dry stems. And, you know, I don't know if anyone knows what an anechoic chamber is, but it's a chamber with no reverb. And they say if you go to an anechoic chamber, within a few minutes, it drives you crazy. Because as animals, we don't want to hear things dry. It freaks us out. It makes us think that, I don't know, we're locked in somewhere small or something. So when I hear dry stuff, it also bothers me a little bit. So I'm going to play you just a piece of this dry stems, and we'll get into some reverb techniques here. Okay, so you have a sense of the production. There's a little bit of producer reverb on the stems, which is normal. You're producing and you have a sound in Serum or Silent or Massive or Nexus, and you're like, it has a little reverb in the preset. Should I make it dry and add reverb later? And I always say no. Go ahead and roll with it. Save as. If you hate it later, we can always bounce a new dry one. But you can roll with a little bit of production reverb and a little bit of production delay. It's fine. And, you know, I'll say it here today in this free webinar. You can put reverb on things that have reverb. Absolutely. You can EQ things that have been EQ'd. You can saturate things that have been saturated. You can compress things that have been compressed. And you can put reverb on things that already have a little reverb. Absolutely. So here we hear this dry production in its dry state. And it's kind of tough to listen to dry stuff. You know, when people send me their music to, you know, for help, when I hear these dry mixes, they're hard to listen to. They're rough on the ears, you know. They're a little anechoic. And like I said, anechoic chambers make people crazy, and so do dry mixes. And right now, this big room production sort of has the ambience of it, almost like someone's playing you a mix in a garage or something. It doesn't have a big room feel. It doesn't make me feel like I'm in a big space, and I want to be. It's Friday night, it's Saturday night, I'm at the club, and I want to feel like I'm in a big space. So we're going to go straight to creating an ambience here on the main synth. And we'll start with Valhalla, since we have so many Valhalla people today. Vintage Verb. I love Vintage Verb. I love Vintage Verb. I think people sleep on it. I don't know why. But it's a brilliant sound and a great design and a cool idea from the designer. So let's take one of these drop chords and let's put a little Vintage Verb on it. And, you know, we're using the send and return matrix. We're not putting reverb on the insert of the individual track. I know that you can do that. And it is legal. It's not illegal. But what happens when you don't use the send return matrix is you can't use other plugins for external processing. And we love to saturate reverbs. We love to do pre-EQ on the send. We love to do post-EQ on the send. And if you put it on the individual sound, you can't do any of that. And that's not good. It's not fun. So we love to use the send and return matrix for more advanced reverb. Now listen, if you have one kick explosion and it's not going to share any other sound, and you want to just make a sound design thing with the reverb, sure, you can do it. But just know that if you set it up that way, you're foregoing a lot of flexibility. Okay, so look here, everybody. What's the biggest knob on this plugin? It's decay. What's the biggest knob on most reverb plugins? It's decay. Why? Because you have to set your decay right. If your decay is too short, it sounds dry, and it's almost exposes, the reverb goes away too quickly and exposes the dry sound. It's almost like ripping the clothes off of someone and seeing them naked. You know, it's strange. All of a sudden, this reverb is this wonderful thing, and then it goes away, and you see the raw sound. It breaks the illusion. So too short of a decay is odd. It exposes the dry sound. Too long of a decay is bad too. Too long of a decay builds up dirty air. Notes, chords, melodies go into the reverb and they hang out way too long. And it makes for a very sour sound. Some people like to set decay by the tempo with delay charts. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't. Every sound, every melody, everything needs to be set by ear and by hand by a human, thank God. And so you're going to have to set, and it's not you should enjoy setting your decay times right. It's going to have to do with the size of the room, the sound, the phrasing of the sound, and you're going to set it by ear. So in big room music, here's what happens to a lot of people. They say, okay, this track is sounding claustrophobic to me. I want to feel like expansive and in a big place. Let me go for a big reverb, like a concert hall. And then they put it on, they send to it, and they're like, oh, this sounds so sloppy. Then they pull down the send, and then it sounds too dry. And then they're sad, and they go away for lunch and feel like they didn't do reverb well. Everyone's done this. I know everyone here has. So here's the key to that. In big room music and using big spaces, which we heard in Altiverb today, they're fun. Big spaces are big. They make us feel like we're in a big space. So the simple technique here is that you can use big spaces and big ambiances, but just always adjust your decay so that it doesn't go on for too long. Best trick to do that is just start and stop with the space bar, and you'll hear the bloom or the tail of your reverb. If it's lasting too long, shorten it. And just experiment with it and get it just right so that it's not too long or not too short within the context of that track according to you. That's why the decay knob is so big. Don't pick presets anymore and not adjust the decay. That is illegal. Okay. So decay has to always be adjusted, and it's always context specific. You can't use some BPM calculator, and you're going to set it. Now the next thing to do, the next big adjustment on reverbs is tonal adjustments. And you'll notice, which is kind of annoying, is that different reverbs all have different philosophies of how you want to adjust things. And so you'll see, you wish you could just learn, one reverb, and then wherever you went in reverb land, it would work the same. It does not work like that. And traditionally, some of the reverb adjusting parameters are annoyingly sciencey and not intuitive, which is why FabFilter Pro R, I think, is a step in the right direction. I think that the Verb Suite from Slate is a step in the right direction. Simple reverb controls that invite you to play with your reverb. Okay, so the next big power move after decay is a high cut. Too much high frequency on a reverb makes it sound fake. I'll say that again. Too much high frequency on a reverb makes it sound fake. Now, sometimes in a glossy pop context, a little bit of shiny reverb makes it sound glossy and poppy and candy, as we say in our school. People say it's easy to make pop music. I say, no, it's hard to make candy, right? It's hard. But a lot of the best pop mixers and the best pop mixes is getting the right brightness on your reverb. You can use a post EQ if you prefer, or you can not be scared to play with the parameters inside the reverb itself. So here is an EQ high cut. Always, after you do your decay, adjust the high cut of your reverb. I'll say it again. After you do your decay, adjust the high cut of the reverb and fine tune the amount of highs you want. It makes a huge difference in the way you perceive that reverb. Where you end up on your high cut is up to you. But if you want to warm up reverbs and make them sound a little bit warmer and more natural, some high cut is a really good idea. Okay, the next thing that you always have to adjust, always, is pre-delay. What is pre-delay? Well, we started today the webinar starting to think about early reflections and late reflections, starting to get our mind used to those two things and how they work together. So pre-delay is the amount of time it takes for the early reflections to come back and be audible to the listener. If you're in a small room, the pre-delay is going to be shorter. The early reflections are going to come hit you in the face because that bag of ping pong balls we talked about is going to bounce off the walls and come right back and hit you. In a big room, the churches, the whispering temples, they're big spaces. So when I say hello, it takes a while for my hello to hit that wall and come back. And we have longer pre-delay times. So if you want to make something feel psychoacoustically that you're in a bigger space, you're going to go for longer pre-delays. And if you want us to feel like we're in a smaller space, shorter pre-delays. So you can set the pre-delay by ear, and it's a very important fine-tuning of a reverb because it can either be a slapback echo, and this you can use a BPM calculator, And sometimes in big room, both vocals and lead synths in lots of music, when we hear that a little bit of a delay and we're like, is that delay or is that reverb? Sometimes it's just a rhythmically timed pre-delay. So it can either be tight or flammy or distinct echo. You set it where you want depending on the sound. Okay, so you can hear that either you can make the pre-delay go away by making it very short. You can use it as a thickener if you're halfway up, or if you can use it as a slapback echo or as a sort of an echoey chamber to create a sense of big sounds. So that's basic editing, right? The decay, the high cut, and the pre-delay. Let's move on to some more sort of advanced editing here. Now, post EQ. This is critical, right? You can play with the tone controls and the EQ controls inside of any reverb plugin. But if you love FabFilter Pro Q2 for reductive EQ, like we do at our school, you can go straight for that. And you can do pre-EQ and post-EQ instances for the reverb. An example of pre-EQ in reverb is when we put reverb on bass and sub bass. People have dry kicks and dry basses. That drives me nuts, right? That's anechoic to me. It's no good. People don't know how to put reverb on a bass. They don't know how to put reverb on a kick. They start to put some reverb on a kick and they're like, oh, now it sounds far away and it sounds muddy. Well, really what we like to do with basses and kicks is we like to put an EQ before the reverb on insert on the return track. I'll say that again. We like to put a reductive EQ on insert on the return track before the reverb plugin to filter out any lows that we don't want to excite the reverb. And this is called reverb pre-EQ. The concept is, let's not clean up, let's not create a mess that we need to clean up. Let's prevent the mess from happening. So we EQ low frequencies off of kicks and basses on the way to the reverb so that we can have sort of reverb from the waist up. From the mid-range and the highs of the kicks have reverb so they don't sound dry, so they don't sound disconnected in the mix, but there's no sloppy lows. And we do this on the way to the reverb instead of making a big bassy sloppy reverb and then cutting it with post EQ. Now, for intermediate and advanced people, just because you do a pre-EQ cut doesn't mean you don't want to do a post EQ cut. Same happens in mastering. Just because we do cuts early on doesn't mean that those frequencies don't build back up again. It's a very typical mistake I see from intermediate and advanced people. They do pre-filter cuts on reverb and they're like, I'm done. Or I cut that low frequency. It couldn't possibly come back. It does come back. So just because you're doing pre-reverb, pre-EQ doesn't mean you can't do post-EQ as well. And it's a very good practice to put a rumble cut or a low cut and cut lows off of your reverbs, both pre and post. So this is a very, very typical instance of post EQ. Roll off the lows. Even if I cut some on the way in, I'm rolling some off on the post EQ. And then a gentle, wide, mid-range boost, 2K, 3K, 4K, a little bit of brightness, not that top brightness, not that 2018, 16K that can be a little fizzy up there. And again, in certain contexts, it works, but a little bit of brightness in the mid-range. And when you start to, and if you see with Pro Q2, it's such a good tool for this because everything is visual. You can make any shape you want. You can see the harmonics of the signal. It's amazing, right? So again, as we get more advanced with reverb, we're going to move away from just picking a reverb and doing the send level and being done. And working with your post EQ on your reverbs, you can get very, very precise shapes and very precise tones from the reverb. And I always say, at the school, when people get their reverbs right, especially with the post EQ, it becomes one thing. It's not like here's the sound and here's the reverb, but it starts to become one believable married thing. And your ear doesn't, we always talk about a mix as being the forest and the trees. You walk through the forest and you see all these beautiful trees, but then also you zoom out and you see this forest. Same thing with dry sounds and reverb. When you get them both right, all you see is the forest. You don't see the tree anymore. And I think the best way to do that is to get good at your post EQ. Editing with reverb and Pro Q2 is the best. Okay, I'm gonna move away from this production. I want to just show this is for the advanced people and the gurus. And it's just a technique that if you've seen it from me before, then you'll love it. If you haven't, it's cool. And if you don't understand it, don't worry. We'll show everyone how to watch this again later. So let's go here. We'll skip ahead. Here is a UAD reverb, and it's nice to see Matt here. It's always nice to see Matt at the webinars. Nice to have celebrities in the crowd, and we have quite a few today. So this is a AKG BX20 spring reverb, and we talked again at the beginning of this webinar about the 4 kinds of reverb: organic, which is real room reverbs captured by mics; analog, which is plates that have been around since the whatever it is, 60s and 70s, are the human's first attempt at creating fake reverb, right? For convenience and creativity. Analog reverb. Plates and spring reverbs are analog processes that create a reverberation sound. Then there's digital algorithmic, which is Lexicon Valhalla, and there's convolution, right, which is Altiverb. So anyway, this is, not to get complicated, but is a somewhat convolution version of an analog reverb, spring reverb. And I love spring reverb. Spring reverb doesn't sound realistic. It doesn't sound like a real room. It certainly doesn't sound like those unsexy recording rooms, but it sounds like a dream. So here is a mandolin with analog convolution reverb BX20 from UAD. Just enjoy this. long and beautiful decay. I know, you have to love it. It's absolutely beautiful, but in a dense mix, it can be out of control. If it's just solo mandolin, well, sure, we can stretch out here. But if it has to fit into a mix, it can be too much. So here's for the gurus, advanced people, intermediate people. There's an inverse side chaining that works really good for lead melodic elements like a lead vocal or a lead melody that you want to have a lushness and a bigness to, but contain it. So we're going to use Pro MB. You could use Pro C2. I like Pro MB. They work similarly. And we're going to put it on insert after the spring reverb. And we're going to send to it as an external sidechain the dry signal itself. I'll say that all again. We're going to take the spring reverb. We're going to put a dynamics tool after it on insert. Pro MB. We're going to have Pro MB listen to the external dry signal of the mandolin. And it's going to do an inverse sidechain. So when the mandolin plays, it's going to push the reverb return down. And what happens now is when it operates counter to what natural reverb would do, and it contains it and controls it in a very unique way. Typically, if I play my mandolin, and I can't play mandolin, but if I play mandolin, when I pluck a string, it excites the reverb, it sends the reverb bloom into bloom, and we get this wonderful bloom that we just heard. But what if I need it to be tighter? What if I want it to be big but tight? How do you do it? This is the best trick that we know. Trick sounds cheap. This is the best technique that we know for having a big ambience but containing it. So watch how this inverse side chaining, using the dry signal as the source, gives us an opportunity to use this rich, lush reverb in a contained manner. Yes, Matt's right. It's ducking. It's ducking. Downward compression. So here's Pro MB, which is multiband, but you can use it in single band mode, and it works really, really good. Now it's all set up here. In the upper right, the external sidechain input is the dry signal. We're in downward compression mode with a fast attack, a pretty fast release, like a 6-to-1 ratio, and as much threshold as you want. But watch the way that it contains the signal. There's the pretty fast attack. Cool, right? It makes it dance around the signal. I'm going to use that, if that's okay, Hugh. I'm going to use that language. It makes the reverb dance around the signal, and the reverb is moving inversely to what it intuitively would do. So what this allows us to do, and I use this on lead vocals and lead melodies all the time, is use much bigger, lusher reverbs, and it gives you a tight, tight sound. Exactly, and you can hear the plucks. So that's one for the intermediate and the gurus. And to me, it's the only way I know of getting that tightness with the lushness. And yes, you can build off of this. And Justin, who's also senior member of our school, you can go into mid-side mode here, and you can have just the center of the reverb ducking and leave the sides unaffected, or you don't have to do all or nothing with the mid side. You can actually go in between. So, all right, so here we go. We're running our show on time like we do in our school out of respect for everybody's busy schedule. So what did we do today? We talked a little bit about reverb in general. We looked at the basic parameters that you have to, it's illegal not to adjust: decay, high cut, pre-delay. Then we looked at post EQ with an external EQ, and not only, putting in a rumble cut, but also going to the mid-range and doing some boosts and cuts, and it's endless, right? It's absolutely endless of what we can do. And using big room reverbs with shorter decays that naturally wouldn't really occur in real life, but who cares? They sound cool. And for fast tempo tracks where long decays become a problem, that's a great trick. And then finally, some side chaining, right? Side chaining the reverb return to the dry signal for a tighter reverb control and response. And I could go on and on. There's saturation, there's mid-side widening of the reverbs. But the most important thing I want everyone to take away from today is that this is deep, and you can have fun with this, and you should enjoy making your reverbs really reflect what you want them to be, right? And everyone will get an email where you can watch this again. So you'll catch an email from us thanking you for coming, and we'll show you how you can watch this again. Absolutely, 100%. All right. It's 3:00, 63 people here on a Monday all over the world. Many friends that I know and many new faces. For all of the loyal friends of the school, thank you always for coming and hanging and supporting and good vibes. For all the new people, this is what we do. And we've been doing this for over a year and a half. We're the #1 school in the world for mixing and mastering courses, which is kind of incredible. And we have lots to offer, all kinds of programs at the school for both self-study and also with teachers and classrooms and students. If you need anything from our school, probably a lot of you already know, we have a live chat on our website. So you can always yell at us on the website and say, hey, I need something. And like I said, every one of our courses can be taken as a video course or with students and set times, and you can mix and match. You can jump into class. We can make it quite easy for you. So whatever you want to do, there's lots of stuff. Also, a couple more announcements. And then anyone who'd like to stay, I'm happy to answer questions for a few minutes. Our core courses start up again in April, but they're ongoing. If you hit us now and you want to learn mastering or next level mixing or mixing foundations or composition or sound design, you can be watching the video library in 10 minutes after this webinar if you want. So you can get instant access to all of the videos, and then you can come to class and ask questions and have classmates as well. And we allow total flexibility around any of that. So look around the site. We have a $47 membership where you get access to all of our master classes, and you also get live feedback and a free question and answer hour every week. Lots of ways to learn. So look around the website. If you have questions, you confused, you need anything, hit us on the live chat. And thank you, Mike Hooks, for putting everything together. Much appreciated. And I just want to thank everyone for coming all over the world. It's incredible. If you like learning in this way, this is what we do at the school. And we have all kinds of programs. We have payment plans. Come hang out with us. All right. Any questions? Any questions at all? Let me see if I can do a couple questions. When you use Pro Key 2, you switch to natural phase mode. Any particular reason? Okay. So this is a question from Bradley. Within any time, I don't want to freak anybody out, but anytime you EQ something, you get a little bit of distortion. The distortion has to do with filter ringing. Filters ring. Digital filters and analog filters ring. It's the oscillation of the processing of the EQ process itself. You can never get away from it. Analog EQs have a little bit of phase distortion, and people say it sounds warm and they love it. Digital phase distortion, there's different management systems within it. And so within FabFilter, the way that they choose to do the phase distortion management is a low latency mode for live stuff, a natural phase mode for production, and then a linear phase mode. Natural phase typically sounds the best because the filter ringing distortion happens after the transient, so we don't tend to notice it. The kick drum kicks, the snare drum snares, and that little bit of distortion happens after the transient and is masked by the transient. In linear EQs, the distortion is moved up so it's sort of centered around the transient, and a little bit of it gets in front of the transient, and you hear what they call pre-filter ringing, which can slur the attack of a kick or a snare and can sound a little bit like a reversed kick sometimes. It has a bit of a weird sound. Amsterdam. You guys, I'm working on having an apartment in Amsterdam. We have so many Dutch friends at the school. It's just a love affair. We'll keep it going. And FabFilter is from Amsterdam. And Reverb, I don't know if it's Amsterdam, Holland for sure. Small country with big influence on music technology. Incredible, disproportionate. Anyway, so in Amsterdam, they figured out how to give us different versions of phase distortion management within EQ. And unless you have two sounds that are phase related, like two recordings of the same snare event, use natural phase. It sounds the best. I know that was a long, long answer to your question, Bradley, but that's the answer. Natural phase, they cooked it up to be the best sounding in most circumstances. Good question. A little technical, but that's fine. Good. Other questions? Yes, I can explain it. I can, Ricardo. Usually when something percussive is sent to a reverb, that transient excites the reverb and causes it to go into a bloom, right? And so, which means that the reverb output rises up, and then it goes into its sort of expansion mode and decay mode. When we use big reverbs, we love the bloom, but sometimes if they have to fit in a mix with other elements, they're too big and too sloppy. So what we do is if we put a ducking sidechain compressor after the reverb return, and we have it listen to the dry signal, when the dry signal plucks up, it pushes the reverb return down instead of up. And this contains the dynamics in the reverb. Who said it? Hugh? And it's like your reverb is dancing around your dry signal. It's not like a static cut. It's a dynamic treatment of containing the reverb. And it works really, really well. And in fact, it's the only way to keep the reverb contained but lively. That's the best way I could put it. Did that make sense? Yes, after the reverb. Good. Okay, good. Yes, after the reverb, before. Yeah, 100%. Good. One more question. What does a typical reverb send setup look like for entire track? How many sends? What kind of signals? I typically use Valhalla from Harry. Typically, we have a send and return matrix, and you can use as many reverbs as you want in a mix. The more advanced you are, the pickier you get. And the less you want to have elements share reverbs. On the one hand, it's nice that reverbs get shared by multiple instruments because it creates a cohesion and a consistency in terms of the ambiances of the mix. So the four main kinds of reverb we use are room reverbs for stuff that's supposed to be close and tight and close to you. Plate reverbs for things that are usually the lead melodies that live in the front of the mix, because plates don't have depth. They're two-dimensional. They're fake. They don't sound like a real room. They don't make stuff, they can sound big, but they usually don't create a lot of distance. So for the lead melodies, we like plates, lead vocal, and they keep us them things in the front of the mix. Then we want to start to build a soundscape of things that are behind the lead, congas, whatever. So here we go to chambers, which are usually small rooms with high ceilings, or larger rooms that make things feel that they're more in the back. And then we also use halls to make things feel like they're way, way in the back. So small rooms, short plates, medium rooms, and halls. Those are the types of reverbs that we typically use. But then as you go, you might say something like this. Okay, I like the congas in that medium room. They really feel good now. They don't crowd the front of the mix. I really hear them as being back behind the vocalist. So they're not fighting. It's not like someone's singing and the conga player runs up while the singer's singing and is like, hey, look at me, right? That's not a good mix. The hey, look at me mix. We want the conga player, and I was one, to know their place and go back behind the singer a little bit, right? And reverb allows us in a mix to create this three-dimensional space, right? To create a three-dimensional space. And so, but here's what happens when you get picky. And I know we're a school of intermediate and advanced people. Then you say, all right, then I'm going to take this one little synth part, and I don't want it to be the star. And in fact, I want to leave space in the front of the mix for the star. And I want to put it back. I want to put it sort of back by the congas. Let me use that conga reverb because I kind of liked it. And then you send the conga, you send the synth to that conga reverb, and you're like, yeah, it's the right idea, but it's not right. Because now your ears are so attuned to having things set up correctly that it doesn't quite do it for you. So what do? You, as a starting place, create a new reverb, use the medium room from Valhalla that you use for your congas, but then you put a post EQ on that reverb, and then you fix the stuff that's bothering you about it. The way that synth is interacting with the reverb that's different from the conga. So to the average listener, they would still perceive it to be in the middle, but it's tuned up according to you. So this is the way that sometimes we end up with lots of reverbs, because we put things in similar spaces. But then we say, I think I can make it a little bit better, a little more precise. Make sense? Okay, good. Excellent. All right. So listen, I'm gonna leak something to everyone who's here today. Just like we have the number one mixing and mastering school in the world, which we do, we're gonna have the number one mixing and mastering forum, and it's starting very, very soon. And we'll let you guys know because I saw even while I was presenting, I see everybody here helping each other in the chat, and that's the spirit of our school. You know, I know there's a million haters out there. Good luck to them. But in our school, we're here to help each other. You know, and we attract very smart people. I don't know why, but we do. So we have this very big international, smart, talented, helpful community, and we're creating the ultimate mixing and mastering forum for that. So and we'll let everybody know where it is, and it's going to be free and it's going to be cool. So there's going to be a lot of cool information sharing happening in the next couple weeks, and we'll keep you abreast of that. And it's going to be really, really cool. So anyway, listen, thank you everyone who came out today. Great to see everyone. I will see everybody online very soon. And anything you need from the school, hit us on the live chat. We'll get right back to you. All right, everybody. Cheers. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Cheers.